I don't care if you've never played fantasy football before. I don't care if you're somebody who doesn't know much about the game of football. I don't care if you're somebody that does play fantasy football every year but isn't very good at it and always seems to find a way to miss the playoffs and or bring up the butt-naked rear in your fantasy football league. You can be successful at fantasy football. There is no question in my mind about that. You just have to do some of the things necessary to ensure that you can be successful, which is part of the reason for me doing this whole fantasy football draft tips series. Now, besides sitting there and waiting to do the draft, which was the topic of the first video of the series, and making sure that you check the league settings, and again, that's incredibly important and this important step that far too often is skipped by far too many people, you need to know what to do next. And the biggest, most critical thing I think any fantasy football player can do across the entire spectrum, novice, first-time player, somebody that doesn't know much about football, somebody that does it every year but sucks at it, somebody that's okay, somebody that's good, somebody that's great. The single most important thing you could do to set yourself up for a position of potential success in fantasy football every season is to make sure you do your damn research. Oftentimes I'll hear people or see people say that, you know, fantasy football is fun for me to do and I really don't care whether I win or lose. Bullshit. That's a type of talk that comes from losers. Anything worth doing is worth doing well. And let's not kid ourselves. It is much more fun when you win as opposed to when you lose. And when it comes to doing fantasy football, to me, it's just like anything else in life. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And honestly, with all of the tools at your disposal in today's internet world, there is absolutely no excuse for you not doing the proper research necessary to make sure you can be a successful fantasy football player. Oh, it takes too much time to do a bullshit. It doesn't take nearly as much time as you think it does. Just a little bit of research can go a long ways. Let me tell you about some of the ways you can do your research that aren't all that incredibly time consuming. You have the internet at your disposal, which is obvious because you're watching this video via the internet some way, shape, or form. So use Google or Yahoo or Bing or some type of search and find some fantasy football websites. Read some damn fantasy football articles. It doesn't take that long to do it. And I promise you, even if you just read a few of them, even if you just check out a few sites, the wealth of information you're going to get from just that little bit of investment in research is going to really pay off for you. Go buy a freaking fantasy football magazine. I'm serious. Especially for you people in money leagues. If you have a $10, $20, $50 buy-in, why not spend $8 on a freaking magazine to educate yourself, familiarize yourself with players' positions and draft positioning worth the potential of maybe making $100, $150, $200, $250, maybe $500? That seems like an investment very worthwhile. Watch other videos about fantasy football on YouTube and other places. Again, these are easy things to do that are not incredibly time-consuming, do not cost you all that much, if anything necessarily in terms of money, that could pay off big time for you. The bottom line is there's no excuse for not doing them. I mean, again, there really is no good reason to not do at least a little bit of research before your fantasy football draft and your fantasy football season. I'm a very big believer in you get out of something what you put into it. The more you put into it, the more you'll probably get out of it. But the truth is with fantasy football, you don't have to put a ton into it to really get something out of it, but you have to put in at least a little bit of effort. You know, the other stuff I already talked about in terms of ways to research, there's more. Check out player stats online. Check out projected team starting lineups online. Check out fantasy rankings from other websites online. Check out all that stuff. Check out your damn league settings for the draft. Find out how many total positions there are, how many starting positions there are, what the starting positions are, how the scoring works in your league, how the playoffs are set up in your league. Again, these are things that are very simple to do, that don't take a lot of time, really don't require anything in terms of from a financial standpoint, but yet so many people don't do them, and then they sit there and wonder why they suck year in and year out in fantasy football. And the biggest thing of all, how can you sit there and prepare yourself for a fantasy football draft if you don't practice a fantasy football draft? I can advocate this to any of you out there, whether you're a novice, whether you're somebody that does it intermediate level, somebody that's good, very good, advanced. You can always get better. And one way to help yourself out from a fantasy football draft standpoint is go do some damn mock drafts online. They might take 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Maybe you only need to do 2 or 3 of them, one a weekend, you know, leading up to your draft. But man, man, does it help you really prepare. It lets you know what players could go where, what players could drop big, what players could really shoot up big. It can let you know the attitudes of fantasy football players all over the place and really help you prepare for your fantasy football draft, meaning you could potentially prepare yourself for a really good fantasy football season. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And again, if you're going to do something, why not be good at it? The more you put into something, the more you're going to get out of it. And when it comes to fantasy football, I don't care if you think you're some statistical genius or you're a complete nincompoop. It doesn't matter. Everybody can be good at fantasy football. No question in my mind about it. But if you're going to do it, you need to do the research necessary in order to make sure that you set yourself up for success. I've talked about the different ways you could research in this video. Again, they're not that time extensive. They're not that cost prohibitive. Just fucking do them. Do your research, and I promise you, you will see the results in your upcoming fantasy football season.